It is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Thursday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Now, North Korea has reiterated its call to South Korea to halt an upcoming annual military drills with the U.S. a day after Seoul and Pyongyang agreed to resume reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The family reunion slated for February 20th to the 25th will likely overlap with the South Korea-U.S. drills reportedly scheduled to start on February 24th, clouding prospects for the reunion event. Now, North Korea's National Defense Commission said Thursday, just minutes ago, via its state-run Korean Central Television, that acts of reconciliation and provocation, such as holding talks and practicing for a war, cannot coexist. It also called on South Korea to drop its confrontational stance, what it calls, and carry out policies that can live up to the expectations of its people. Now, in response, South Korea's Unification Ministry said the agreement reached by the two Koreas on the family reunions must be kept no matter what, adding that the joint military drills will take place as scheduled. So if and when this much anticipated humanitarian event does take place, can it serve as a starting point for rosier inter-Korean ties? Here's ARIRANG News Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee.
Will the resumption of reunions for divided families pave the way for improved relations between the two Koreas? South Korean President Park Geun-hye expressed her hopes via her spokesperson on Thursday that the humanitarian event could open up a new era of inter-Korean relations.
We hope the upcoming reunions will be a starting point for improved inter-Korean relations and serve as a foundation for opening up an era of reunification, bringing peace and cooperation to the Korean peninsula.
Wednesday's agreement to resume family reunions from February 20th to the 25th came as a surprise to many, as it was reached in less than 5 hours of talks. What's more surprising is that the dates overlap with South Korea's joint military drills with Washington. North Korea had earlier warned the reunions could not take place amid gunfire, but the upcoming drills were not a major issue during the talks.
There was no specific mention by North Korea of the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills, nor a call for the military exercises to be canceled during the talks.
South Korea said it views the latest agreement as a positive sign. Pyongyang has been cranking up its peace offensive this year, although many have questioned the regime's motives. The Koreas left open the possibility of further cooperation, promising additional rounds of talks after the reunions to discuss a wide range of humanitarian issues that could include South Korean food aid to the north. But despite the friendlier tone, an air of skepticism lingers, as North Korea has a history of breaking its promises, including its last-minute cancellation of a round of family reunions just last year. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye is kicking off her second year in office with a series of status reports from government ministries this week. The 4 security ministries were in the hot seat today, giving their first collaborative report in 4 years. And as our Park Ji-won reports, North Korea took center stage in their policy reports.
At the Defense Ministry in Central Seoul on Thursday, the Foreign, Unification and Defense Ministries and the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs briefed the President on their annual policy goals and plans for the year. The Foreign Ministry said it will take a principled and effective two-track approach to denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, against a backdrop of increased insecurity in inter-Korean relations. The ministry said it would improve bilateral cooperation with neighboring countries such as China and Russia and its traditional ally, the United States, while using multilateral pressure to engage with North Korea. This is part of the Foreign Ministry's 3 main policy goals of building a sustainable peace on the peninsula, inducing change in North Korea, and securing global support for reunification. The Unification Ministry says it will aim to create sustainable inter-Korean policies through dialogue and a variety of cooperative projects, and to lay the groundwork for reunification with the North. In its three-pronged strategy, the ministry said it will work toward building a sustainable peace, carry out the president's policy of trust politic, and make mid- and long-term plans for the reunification of the two Koreas. One part of the strategy involves building a peace park in the DMZ between North and South Korea. The Defense Ministry vowed to strengthen its ability to react to nuclear threats and prepare for the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to Korea. This is the first time in 4 years that the security-related ministries came together to give a status report to the president. Government officials say the joint briefing shows the government is concentrating its efforts on coordinated foreign and security policies. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Now, the United States says North Korea has started developing its own road mobile intercontinental ballistic missile. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper said in his latest annual unclassified worldwide threat assessment that the missile, the KN-08, could be capable of hitting parts of the continental U.S., although it remains untested. Now, experts in the U.S. are divided on whether Clapper's claim gives weight to whether Pyongyang is inching closer to developing a fully operational ICBM that can carry a miniaturized nuclear weapon. Then U.S. Forces Korea Commander Army General James Thurman said in October last year that North Korea's, quote, continued desire to develop long-range missiles is apparent in any case. The United States has retained its position as a top military spender in the world, even as spending on defense last year dropped worldwide. Now, in its annual report on military spending, the International Institute for Strategic Studies said the United States spent over $600 billion on defense in 2013, followed by China with $112 billion and Russia with $68 billion. In Saudi Arabia and the UK. Now, South Korea ranked 11th with $32 billion. The institute said military budgets shrank around the globe last year, but while the U.S. and many European countries are steadily scaling back their military spending, Russia and countries in Asia and the Middle East are investing more. The institute also said defense spending is expected to rise overall for the first time in 5 years this year, mainly due to the soaring budgets of China and Russia. Well, at the National Assembly on this Thursday, a candidate nomination system took center stage on the first day of a 4-day hearing. Now, lawmakers from the two main rival parties debated over whether to scrap a system in which political parties nominate candidates for local elections, a campaign pledge made both by ruling and opposition presidential candidates back in 2012. Now, the main opposition Democratic Party is demanding President Park fulfill her pledge to abolish the system, saying that the ruling party is reneging on the pledge because of its own political interests ahead of local elections on June 4th. The ruling Saenuri Party argues that getting rid of the system could do more harm than good and suggested that adopting an open primary may be the best way to give the public a chance to nominate candidates. Meanwhile, a local think tank says the financial jitters surrounding emerging economies are not likely to affect the Korean economy. In its monthly economic assessment released today, the Korea Development Institute said that the impact of falling stock prices and the depreciation of the local currency will be limited as Korea's economic fundamentals are relatively strong. Well, the institute also said that the Korean economy is on the path to recovery, helped by a modest improvement in domestic demand and growing demand from advanced countries for exports. And on the local bourse, shares in Seoul closed higher on this Thursday as better than expected earnings by Naver triggered a rally in tech stocks. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi gained 0.9% to finish the day at 1908, while turnover was a moderate 3.9 trillion won, roughly $3.6 billion, slightly above the January average of nearly 3.9 trillion won. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also ended the trading session 0.8% higher, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency closed weaker against the greenback at 1,079 won flat. Now, Korea's major public energy companies are vowing to tackle their debt problems by selling their stakes in overseas projects in line with a government push for public sector reform. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance and the Trade Ministry said Thursday that the energy companies will aim to reduce their debts by 2017, according to plans they submitted last month. Now, the Korea Gas Corporation plans to sell a 49% stake in a gas development project in Iraq for roughly $280 million. The Korean National Oil Corporation will sell stakes held by its Canadian subsidiary in mining and gas projects, while the Korea Electric Power Corporation has offered to sell its stake in offshore uranium and coal mines. Now, yesterday, Wednesday, on the first day of receiving status reports from government ministries, President Park Geun-hye stressed the need for bold deregulation to stimulate economic growth, telling officials to uproot abnormal practices in society. Here's Shin Se-min with more.
President Park Geun-hye is demanding the government step up its game to deregulate the economy and to overturn abnormal practices and policies. Kicking off a series of annual policy briefings from government agencies at the presidential office of Cheongwadae on Wednesday, the president ordered ministries to determine the difficulties companies are facing and devise methods to help them by capping the number of regulations placed on them. She also urged the Office of Government Policy Coordination to have the spirit of the Jindo, a breed of hunting dog from Korea that won't let go until it removes a piece of flesh.
작은 과제 하나라도 비정상의 뿌리가 뽑힐 때까지 끝까지 추진해 나가는 것이 중요합니다.
President Park also told government agencies to fully concentrate on drastically reforming regulations holding businesses back so the economy has room to flourish. She also stressed the need to correct lax management and establish laws to eradicate corruption. The president also spoke about hundreds of economy-related bills sitting the National Assembly, saying all the efforts put into drafting them will count for nothing without Parliament's support. The policy reports will run through February 24th, with President Park scheduled to receive a total of 9 policy reports from over 20 government ministries, commissions, and agencies. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
As our Shin Se-min just reported, President Park Geun-hye has ordered her government to step up efforts to deregulate the economy and uproot abnormal practices in society. She wants to see that translating to an actual improvement in the lives of the average Korean. Well, for a closer look at this issue, we're joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Yongjoo, the head of KLNP Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, President Park said deregulation drive. How strong is this initiative and how extensive is the scope? I mean, she has been talking about this for some time now.
Right. Looks like her drive is very strong. She's getting good at using sound bites these days, just like she called, unification 대박, jackpot.
Right.
Now, I think she was using the image of, I don't know, the movie and a dog here, dreaming about deregulation even in your dreams, multiple layer dreams here. I'm talking about Inception. The movie itself, and also, having 진돗개 spirit. Once it bites something, it will never let it go. So basically, persistent. Be consistent. Continuously think about ways to deregulate. I think her strong message was as strong as it can be. So I think she expressed her determination very, very clear. Actually, her thinking about or commitment about deregulation started quite a while ago. Last year, during her first year, about like halfway into it, she began talking about deregulation as a key way to revive the economy. And I remember back in November 18th, when she gave a speech at the National Assembly, she actually said that the whole deregulation should go all the way, all around in all industries. Before then, she was talking about deregulation in service sectors and medical services and so on. But November 18th, she said deregulation in all sectors. Now, using these metaphors and all that, she has expressed her determination big time.
So why is she bringing up this issue now again? I mean, is job creation really the rationale behind this? I mean, what's the background?
Absolutely. I think job creation is clearly in her mind, basically. And last year, during her first year, at the beginning, she was somewhat talking about the economic democratization and all that kind of stuff. But as time went on, she realized she really needs this alliance with the business community. And she was looking into it hard, what community really wants. And what business community wants is actually deregulation. And she thought that would be a good thing for the business community as well as the entire economy for creating jobs and then reboosting the economy as a whole. So there was an agreement point between the business community on one hand and then president on the other and the government on the other. And the government's hope for the business community to create more jobs and what's the way to go? Her conclusion is deregulation.
So what are some of the concrete steps to propose for this deregulation drive? I mean, how effective do we expect these these measures to be?
Yesterday, I think the key message that I found very interesting was the maximum cap on regulations. She proposed a quantitative cap on regulations. Each ministry would not go up to a certain level beyond that in terms of number of regulations. If they want to introduce new regulations, they will have to get rid of existing regulations. So that quantitative cap, I thought, was a very interesting idea indeed. And in September, the government will introduce a new law to make this idea systemic at the National Assembly. So we'll have to wait and see how that law passes at the National Assembly in coming month, and probably National Assembly will talk about it and discuss it until September when the government wants to make it into a law. In addition to that, of course, a little bit of older ideas such as the negative system, where the law should specify what cannot be done, and then beyond that, everything can be done, basically, that approach. And also sunset clauses, where they will attach time limits on regulations, and beyond which they will review the effectiveness and the use of those kind of laws. So those old ideas attached to that quantitative cap was interesting idea. Additionally, another additional idea was based on recognition that local governments often introduce a lot of different regulations. And so evaluating or publicizing the measurements of how each local governments actually introduce regulations, which could have a negative connotation for the public as a whole. So another idea of innovation right there.
Well, but some people could argue, or many believe, that regulations were put there for a purpose, and too much deregulation is not always a good thing. So there's always this tension over the question of deregulation.
Right, balance is the key thing right there, because we have this system of market on one hand and politics on the other. Politics is the area where the people come together with a consensus to regulate the market. When the market itself goes out of hand, basically. So that's the system of democracy we have in place. So because of that, always there's a tension and there's a call for regulation and there's a call for deregulation always. Of course, we have regulations there for various reasons. For consumers, for instance, we need protection and their safety and all that. And but of course, in response to that, the business community always asks for market freedom and effectiveness and efficiency and all that, calling for deregulation. But there are other players. Government, they're there to set rules, and that's their mission, basically watching the market and all that kind of stuff. And bureaucrats, they don't want to let go of their power and influence by letting go of the regulation. So there is always those personal interests right there. And also another addition is, in addition to this equation, is the National Assembly, the lawmaking body, where lawmakers compete against one another by introducing more and more and more laws and regulations to show off to their constituents, to tell them that they're working hard. So it's a complicated dynamics.
Right, to show people that they are working.
Right.
Well, so what are some of the key principles that we need to keep in mind here? I mean, what should the direction of this latest deregulation drive be?
Of course, regulations are introduced to address market failures. We learned that in Economics 101 there. So we should always keep in mind, whether these regulations are introduced to address market failures or maybe addressed to address specific private interests. Sometimes some industries want their own protection. They want to avoid competition. For that, they want to introduce the regulations. So the tension between private interest on one hand, that's always kind of hidden behind the cause of public interest, and then real public interest on the other. That keeping that balance is critical. So this kind of like expert discussion in media will be very important, and in addition to that, also active public discourse about the need for this kind of regulation will be always necessary. So we need basically active democracy in order to keep right balance between regulation on one hand and deregulation on the other. I mean, there's never a right answer to this. I mean, for an example of Wall Street, for instance, right? People complain for the last several decades, deregulation went on too far to create all this mess and messiness and chaos for the world entirely. So there's no right answer to this. So that's why we need this kind of active discussion here.
Right, right. And I think the key word there that you mentioned was democracy in the market, in the global market as well.
Right.
And, with their right to freedom, with deregulation, comes, I suppose, more corporate responsibility.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to wait and see how that balances out.
Sure.
All right, Dr. Kim Yongjoo, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from local.
Now, the opening ceremony for the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics is now a little over a day away. Athletes from around the world are arriving, and it seems so far so good security-wise. However, with the threat of terrorism hanging over the Games, the United States has 2 warships on standby in the Black Sea. Connie Kim reports.
In the months leading up to Sochi Winter Olympics, 3 suicide bombings have rocked cities in Russia, and the threat of terror attacks has hovered like a dark cloud over the impending Games. Although Russian President Vladimir Putin has promised a ring of steel to secure the Games, the United States has positioned 2 warships in the Black Sea as a means of protection against potential terrorist attacks. The U.S. Navy says the USS Mount Whitney and the USS Ramage will be in the area to respond to any emergencies during the Olympics. Equipped with machine guns, rockets, and anti-ship missiles, the ships could transport supplies to around 3,000 people in case of any emergency evacuation. Also, the U.S. has warned airlines with direct flights to Russia to be aware of the possibility of explosives hidden in tubes of toothpaste or containers holding skincare products, as they could be used to store ingredients that could be assembled aboard. Russia has banned passengers from carrying any liquids and carry-on luggage during the Games. Meanwhile, Russian security forces have killed the suspected mastermind of recent suicide bombings on public transportation services in the southern city of Volgograd. Russian state media reported Wednesday that Zamaldin Mirzayev was shot dead by security forces during a house siege in Russia's Restiv, Dagestan region. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The United Nations has denounced the Vatican for adopting policies it says allowed priests to sexually abuse thousands of children over a period of decades. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child issued a scathing report on Wednesday saying church officials kept quiet about child sex abuse to protect the reputation of the church. The UN body's exceptionally blunt paper also demanded the Vatican immediately remove all clergy accused of child abuse and turn them over to civil authorities.
Another matter was the code of silence that was imposed by the church on children, and the fact that reporting to national law enforcement authorities has never been made compulsory.
The Vatican responded by saying it's committed to defending and protecting the rights of the child. The church complained that it had already introduced many of the changes called for in the report and that the report's conclusions were not up to date. Responding to criticisms about the Vatican's opposition to homosexuality, contraception, and abortion, the church said the world body was trying to interfere with the Catholic Church's teaching and in the exercise of religious freedom. Sex abuse victims, however, welcome the UN's report.
I've been very touched by the recommendations and the conclusions of the report because I feel very validated.
The UN's report called on the Vatican to report back on its progress in 2017. Although the recommendations are not compulsory, the committee expects Pope Francis and the Holy See to act on them. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Well, it is a warm winter day with dry conditions here in Seoul, but here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to Arirang. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.